What's up, everybody? Matt Aguilar here from Comicbook.com, and welcome to the Pull List. I have two phenomenal co-hosts with me today, Kofi Outlaw and Jim Viscardi. What's up? How are you doing?
Wow,
Ready to talk some comics?
What up?
Yeah. See, I'm in a good place. I'm in a good place this morning. I'm giving everyone positive vibes. I'm trying to do it. How are you guys this morning?
Good.
Good.
This was a big week for comics.
Oh my Lord. Okay, so I just copied all the books releasing this week. And this is literally, we're going to cover a lot, but we're going to cover 10%. It feels like
We're going to go fast.
it feels like, of this year. And by the way, we're not even factoring in trades and all that. So yes, big week. We got a lot to get into. We got storylines progressing. We got some kind of, coming to a natural conclusion. The launches of new universe, which I'm very excited about here. But let's start with X-Men Forever, #1. This is smack in the middle of, if you've been following Immortal X-Men, we've actually been talking about Immortal X-Men a lot more on the show. And so if you've been following that, this is very much, at least it feels like, right up your alley, answering some questions. And also, honestly, for me, setting up like a million more. I don't like that. Here's my question with this. And this is kind of targeted at Kofi, because Kofi has been the one like deep in the trenches on Immortal X-Men, you know, more so than me. And I don't know where you come at it from.
It's the best of the X-Men books, but okay.
Okay, so this is to you two then. Is it getting to the point where Fall of X and this like one shot specifically, or this book is like, I know Kofi's mentioned things like eating its own tail in the past, but like, is it starting to get a little too much, too convoluted? There's so much going on in this book.
I mean, we can cut through it. It's a mess. Like the fall is really about how the structure of this is all falling apart. I was like going to be trepidatious about getting into this because I am like the X-Men guy, the Krakoa guy, but like, oh, it's going to be a dicey week for X-Men. It feels like when we were just talking about everything. But
I think the biggest thing that I think.
Let me get.
Oh yeah, go ahead. You finish.
The reason being is because eating its own tail is a good way to do it. It's like, I think the ordering of these books is what's kind of tripping me up. It's like, we've read several Dead X-Men. I mean, half of this is like setting up the plot of Dead X-Men, which we've already been reading. So it's like. Okay, the other half of this is stuff like all these other books have kind of circled around or touched on so much of the stuff that's already happening in here that I'm like, okay, but what's new about this one, which was like the most confusing piece of it that I had to get. And it was just basically a couple scenes of what Xavier's really doing, that his plots within his plots are happening. Right. And that's the only new information in here, really. Like, and a little bit more interaction with Enigma and that whole thing. But otherwise, we've seen like the Destiny game, her problems with Mystique, you know, that the No Space X thing and their plot, Rachel and her whole squad doing their thing to locate Moira. And we already know where all of this is headed with, you know, basically Xavier's plot to erase all this and to just, you know, murder Moira when she's in her first life. So we already know where this is headed. So this book is just kind of too little, too late in a sense. And it's also confusing it because it makes you like trip out and be like, have these weird deja vus. Like, have I gone through several lifetimes of reading this? Like, was this my fifth life of reading this? Like, but you know, and so it's just becoming hard to keep straight, even though it's a pretty basic storyline. And we talk about crossovers and not getting to this point, but we've gotten to this point. Like, just trying to map out like what's happening in the White Hot Room, you know, what Mother Righteous is doing, what Iron Man and the on the ground surviving X-Men have been doing to fight that war and take on the Sentinels, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and what Xavier's doing and with hopping through these timelines and doing all that. Yeah, it's all gotten really convoluted and messy. Gonna make for one hell of a graphic novel, thick one when you get it. And they can, you know, straighten this all out. But like,
they have to rearrange a bunch of the issues to make it all make sense. Yeah. Because if they're doing it in release order, it's going to be just as confusing.
They're gonna you need to have this all straightened out in a big graphic novel that just throws the issues at you in the chronology of like how you should have been reading them, rather than whatever this release is.
Yeah, I will say I think the thing that like no shade
I'm,
at the
I'm already
new...
getting flamed in the comments. Oh my God.
This is no shade to the new X-Men teams, which I'm very excited for. Although it makes me real sad that Kieran Gillen is not a part of some of the new X-Men stuff. I love Kieran Gillen on the X-Men.
Yeah, Immortal X-Men's great.
He's one of few writers who really knows how to handle overpowered characters, right? And I think that's what's been kind of the through line through through Immortal, and then even to an extent here, like this feels like a great issue released in the absolute wrong time, which I don't, and like that's really just kind of been that's like my only real downside to this. But and the only other thing that too is right, like the thing I'm looking forward to once we get past all of this is hopefully that Marvel takes a much more classic approach to X-Men events that they used to, where it was just like the through line of the story, if it was going to take place in multiple books, happened like over the course of weeks in the various books. There was a very clear part 1, part 2, part 3 going through X-Men, New Mutants, whatever, because like that's what I think this desperately needed. But like really just to go back to just this issue, I like this issue. Like I said, I like when Kieran Gillen writes these characters. I love when Kieran Gillen writes Sinister. Like if there's now a person who I think is so connected to that character as like the writer for Sinister, it's Kieran Gillen. I still hate like everyone's like been up in arms on how the X-Men writers have like just destroyed Beast. I'm going to throw Charles Xavier into that mix too, because I feel like they have just
interesting.
Just destroyed that character. But anyway,
also Beast was destroyed before this era even got
That's
here, so
true.
I don't know what those people are smoking.
Beast was going in that direction, but man, did they really set him on fire during Krakoa.
Man. Xavier, it's like all the happy-go-lucky characters had to get a reality check, man. Like Xavier couldn't keep spouting that thing, and I loved Cyber Helmet Xavier much more than I've loved Charles Xavier in a long time. Like, I'm just mad. I feel like mad. I feel betrayed that he took off the helmet, Like, once he took off the helmet, like, it all went downhill.
I had to, because then otherwise he's just the Maker.
Which I loved about him.
The mutant Maker.
Which is the Maker is awesome. Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, look, I love the Maker, but he's just mutant Maker.
More helmets.
That's what makes the Maker work, by the way, is that he embraces the terrible character he already is. So he just embraced the terribleness that is Reed. Xavier, if you've read, I mean, geez, what is Deadly Genesis? You go back to any of the books in the last like 10 years and read just like how horrible a leader and a father figure Xavier is. And it's like, yeah, okay, he's just embraced who he was. And I'm good with that. I'm good with that. But I agree with you, Jim, on this. I don't actually have an issue with the issue itself, the story that's being told here. I just agree that like I don't know who the hell this is for, because the people who have already been steeped in this are already steeped in it, so they already know 80% of this, and the Xavier stuff is the most interesting part. But literally you could have tacked on in any other tie-in series and it been just as relevant, and this isn't an on, because who the hell would read this as their first entryway into this story? And
well, that's what I mean, right? Like if you read this,
so like
there's no way to get in.
No, it's even if you're in, there's no way to get in. Like,
right,
yeah,
it's
so yeah. I think that's the biggest issue of it.
And I don't know.
So
what
anyone have any last notes on it?
No.
Why?
Anyone have any last notes before we touch on? Okay, there you go. We're gonna move into some more positive territory, at least for me. Superman number 12. This has been one of me and Kofi's favorite series throughout, and aside from, I think there was a big annual, and then I think there was like a small gap between issues, but now we're getting kind of issue 12, kind of the conclusion of this year-long arc, but we're still setting up for the incoming House of Brainiac that is about to take over Action Comics and Superman. So that stuff is in this, teeing things up. I am stoked for that event, but I think the way this finale ends, they've done such a good job about planting seeds for future stories, not abandoning characters. We get a lot of like satisfying payoffs in this that have been, if you've been reading since issue 1 and you've been sticking around with Supercore and Parasite, and like all of those things pay off in this issue. Like there's a lot of callbacks, and they actually mean something and affect the current plot. So I just really appreciate that. And also, I mean, I love that also we're not like one and done with these characters, right? We leave things in a place like these characters are still in the world. They're like, we're not like letting those like threads completely lie and like, oh, we're closing the chapter on Farm and Graft. Oh, we're like moving on from the chain. Like, yes, it comes to a conclusion, but like not a, oh, hey, Yellow Jacket's around. Oh no, he's not here anymore. Like it's not that kind of thing as an MCU reference that I hate, where it's like villains are one and done. I really appreciate this, and I dug it all the way through. Jim, I don't actually know where you stand on Superman. I don't know if you've been following the series or not.
This has been I've been reading it mainly because of Josh Williamson, and this has been great. Has been a ton of fun. I think the art throughout the whole arc has been really good, and I think this is kind of when looking at the dawn of DC and all of that stuff as a whole, I think this is a great. This is something that now that it's all done, you can hand someone and say, like, who wants to like just kind of get into current DC and say this. And if they're a Superman fan, like, this will definitely pique their interest and get them involved. And so I'm glad for that sake, because I feel like we don't really have much of that in comics. And so at the end of this, like it had its up downs all arounds, and it sticks the landing for sure.
Yeah, I think this is an evergreen. This is going to be an evergreen Superman title for years to come. You can hand these 2 volumes to people and like, hey, you want just a great Superman, especially if you were a fan of Superman the animated series. Me and Kofi have talked about that extensively, right? That vibe. Like, here you go. Here's 2 volumes. You get everything you need. Yeah, there was, and the annual was actually fantastic. Like, here's everything you need. Kofi, how did you feel about this?
It was going to be, I was kind of curious if they were going to be able to stick the landing of this or get lost and, creative things. Joshua Williamson's got a lot going on. He's been writing a lot of things. So I was kind of curious about that. We had gotten into so many kind of like little threads and elements, but this kind of finale pulled it together really well. Like, I don't think there was anything we left on the table from any of the turns of this story, going back to like Parasite in the early issues, Farm and Graft, Lena Luthor coming back and Lex's daughter, coming into it, Supercorp being a part of this whole thing, the different colored kryptonites that sent Superman to the past and all that, like all of it mattered and came back into play in actually, but still, like you said, it still has this Superman the animated series kind of episodic enough structure to it that you get the basic point. Got to get kryptonite gas out of Metropolis. Nice role reversal where Superman can't be the one to fly out and use his brawn. Now Lex has to suit up and do that, while Superman has to be the brain and the guy in the chair and do that whole thing. And one of my favorite exchanges in the book is Lex is like, well, you're going to have to try to match my genius, like, even faster. And Superman's like, okay, like, all right. Like, and that whole thing. But and so what we loved about this Superman series is, we said for the first time in a long time, while Action Comics has done all the stuff with the super family and whatnot, like, this actually makes you understand that Superman has a world around him. That world has a lore. It made Metropolis more interesting than it's ever been, with this kind of secret history of Lex Luthor that we don't know. And even this issue ending by them saying, like, hey, that part of it's not over. There are more secrets in the history of Metropolis buried under here and in Lex Luthor's head, and Farm and Graft, the Chained, and all these exciting things that come out of this. Metropolis feels like more interesting and exciting to be in than it has in a long time. So they didn't just kind of revamp Superman. They've also revamped his world and added elements of mixing old elements with new elements and kind of doing that Chip Zdarsky thing and with the lore, and making me excited to play in Metropolis again. So Now we get a tease of a bigger, even story arc coming that's motivating this whole thing that we just read through this, very intricate saga. And yeah, it's great Superman storytelling.
Yeah, gotta say, like, even the stuff that's like not touched on here. I mean, you still have the, Marilyn Moonlight stuff. Like, there's still a lot of things to be mined from her whole story. You have Perry and everything that's going on with him, burying the past, all that other stuff that's come out. And then on top of that, you have the Lobo stuff. And if you've been reading, action and things like that, how that's been approached from the Brainiac side, like, there's so much happening. And I gotta say, yeah, with Williamson's workload, like, dude's like writing, I feel like
dude writes what feels like 30 books a month.
Yeah, he wrote. I mean, he's got 2 this week. We're gonna get into Cobra Commander. Like, dude writes so much. So yeah, no, I'm very excited for this. All right, so let's move into a book that I was very excited about. I know Jim is a fellow fan of the world. Kofi did not partake in this one, so this is going to be me and Jim on this. The NacelleVerse.
Don't sell me. I tried. I jumped in and tried.
I just got my Nacelle Biker Mice figures. I'm so excited.
Oh, what?
We love our friends at Nacelle.
Jealous. Oh my god. Okay. We're gonna have a talk after the podcast. So all right, so I'm excited about this. Obviously, you've been, it's been a full court press, right? We have the toys, we have this whole world that's being built under Oni Press, and this issue is very much that. It's we talked about it. I forget, there was a whole other, I think a couple weeks, actually, I think that was the last time Jim was on. We talked about another book that kind of did the same thing of building this world, introducing you a bunch of characters. I think in this case, we essentially follow one character, and it kind of establishes his character early on, and then we follow them, and just through the course of their story, we meet all of the other kind of lead main characters that will be the solo books coming out of this, supporting this. And I think that for me, while I am it's going to be hit and miss for people because there are so many different types of characters and worlds, everything's not going to click with you. No. I do think that through the course of this 48-page one shot, you will find multiple stories that you will want to follow or that will appeal to you. Obviously, I'm a huge Biker Mice from Mars fan. That is the whole reason I followed this world in the first place. So I am, was all in on that. But I also discovered 2 other stories that I'm intrigued in. And also, the great Garlu. I love Garlu. Is kind of precious to me. I want to follow that. It was a great avatar into everything else. So I dug this. Everything didn't click with me, but I think I think there were 4, 5 stories if you count Garlo, because he will get his own series. Yep. So 5 stories overall, and I think 3 out of the 5 are ones I want to continue to follow. So I think that's a win for me. What'd you feel like, Jim?
Well, I think that's the thing. Look, to be totally honest, right? And this is no slight to the folks over at Nacelle. These are a lot of properties that people are hearing probably for the first time, right? Like this, I imagine this is a book that diehard fans of RoboForce and Sectars and all that will probably pick up. But for those who are more so our age, right, Matt, that are going to come in because of Biker Mice, there's a lot of learning going on in this book. But I think if anything, it just goes to show that, right, with good storytelling, you can kind of make it all work. And I think for the most part, I think that happens here. I think there's a few that are, a few things that happen throughout the issue where I'm just like, okay, but the stuff that I wanted to be good, the stuff that I was more familiar with RoboForce and Biker Mice and all that, I was like, oh, okay, yep, no, great. And so I'm more curious than anything else to see how all of this kind of comes together, because this is something that I think they have kind of said we'll all kind of tie together, right? They're doing some animated series, and that's going to play off stuff that happens in this book and in their kind of universe at large. I don't necessarily it'll be interesting to see just inevitably how it all kind of comes together, because I think that's a very big, daunting task. And don't get me wrong, like I would have just loved to have read a RoboForce book on its own or a Biker Mice book on its own, which we're going to get. But, but will we, how it ties into everything else, still to be seen, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Kofi, has anything we have said made you want to jump into to this book world?
I mean, it's made me question a lot of my life choices, but not so much to jump into this book. I just don't think it's for me. I think I'm questioning who it's for, but like,
it's for nerds like us. It's for nerds like me and Jim.
In terms of ambition, like linking all these properties in one big story that's a big swing. So I can give, I can commend the swing. But
here's the other thing too, right? Like these are like, Nacelle is working on animated shows for a number of these. We know RoboForce is in the works. We know Biker Mice is in the works. I think the goal for them, at least, is probably to be like, once this stuff starts to hit, depending on where it's distributed or whatever, then there will be books that people can go and check out. And then inevitably, if that means that they go back and check out older stuff, great. But I think the goal is like, let's get this stuff out now. I mean, like, look, the Biker Mice cartoon is being co-produced by Maximum Effort, Ryan Reynolds' company. Yep. And so like Ryan Reynolds is involved in Biker Mice from Mars, which is a sentence I don't think anyone expected to say in the year 2024. So
I am so happy that's a real sentence. Still one of my favorite cartoons ever. So good. All right. So I'm very excited for that. You can check out, and I agree though. I think the other one for me was it Power Lords? I think that's the other one that I was kind of interested in. All right, so let's move in. I realized something shortly before this episode started. I blanked on reading Wonder Woman, and I cannot believe I actually did that. That is one of my favorite series.
There were a lot of books.
I did.
So Kofi, what do you think about it? Okay.
It's a weird detour. It's a very strange detour kind of issue. I'm having a hard time getting through all of it. But essentially, it's a kind of side issue where Wonder Woman and Superman go to an intergalactic mall to find a gift for Batman. And it's the artwork is very different. It's a weird and a side story.
It's Gilliam March, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a weird departure, and I haven't gotten to the end to see how it all ties in yet because it was hard to get through. But it's a weird loss of momentum from where we were just before this to it's very, very weird kind of jolting shift from where this battle we just had and like the ominous things that were supposed to happen with this and how we get here and why. I'm gonna hold off judgment till I get to the end. I never want to talk too much about a comic till I get to the end. But
I think for me, I'm a person who loves when Tom King does slice of life stuff, right? But I agree, coming off what we just got, like this one it almost felt too cute. In a sense, right? Where a lot of like just even some of the dialogue and back and forth where it's just like, but I'm sure we'll get back on track. This one just feels a bit more like a road speed bump than anything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was that.
Well, if there was one to miss, I guess that was the one.
Yeah, I mean, your instincts were not wrong this week.
I don't know, man. You'll probably end up loving it.
I probably will. And I do love Gilliam March's artwork in the past. Yeah. Gotham City Sirens, I love his run forever on that. So I will move to a book I did not see myself actually kind of jumping into full speed ahead in 2024, but Spawn 351 is out. Spawn 350 kind of reset a lot of stuff and was actually a perfect issue to jump in for me, someone it's been a minute since I've read Spawn faithfully. It's actually been quite a while. I've kept up with other things. Like I've kept up with Scorched and some other stuff sometimes, but like I pop in. I don't continually read. But I'm here. I do love Brent Booth's artwork. And there was a lot here. I dig the changes. It kind of lets me, someone who's more casual, jump in and kind of feel like I'm not completely off footing. The fights are as kind of brutal and, crunchy as I remember. It definitely lives up to that. So I had fun with this. I don't know. I know, Jim, I know you're the bigger Spawn person.
It's an interesting one because just like you said, it actually does feel kind of perfect for someone to get into the new Spawn status quo, which who knows how long it's going to last for. But a major change happened at 350 that almost puts you learning this new status quo with Al Simmons as he's trying to figure out this, like the new status quo for this. I loved Carlo Barberi's work prior to this. Like it felt like real good superhero, like almost like Marvel DC style classic superhero stuff. But I mean, it's great when Booth does this stuff too, because he's so good.
Yeah, no, I was digging this. I don't think you read Spawn, right, Cove?
No, I didn't read Spawn.
Okay.
I had a couple
Missing
other
out.
things though that were good.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I want you to get into those.
Invincible Iron Man continues the kind of the detailing of Iron Man's new armor design, his Mysterium armor, and this kind of Sentinel busting armor that he makes. Kind of a weird issue because it's a fight, but then it kind of sets up a whole issue to come that's going to be about Tony Stark being trapped in his armor, and kind of this weird, one of those weird reflective issues where a character's like stuck in a single place, but it's a whole like mental emotional kind of retrospective. So we're going to get one of those. That was a weird turn I didn't see coming in the middle of the war, but here we are. I also am reading The Resurrection of Magneto, which is it gets really interesting because we have Shadow King kind of brought back in, and Shadow King's apparently all the rage these days between Ultimate X-Men and this book, but it connects the idea of Shadow King with some of these other entities we've seen in Marvel before. Some of these other kind of classic monsters and characters. And it does the job of getting us to what this title proclaims in a pretty exciting way of Storm and Magneto kind of traversing these weird planes between existence and non-existence and what that all means. And us getting this kind of kick-ass new lease on Magneto that's going to carry us into these new X books, presumably. So getting that boiled down to where Magneto, and there's a great symbolism of him just going through all the name crap and just being like, oh no, finally I'm Magneto. Like that's who I am. And that's where we needed to be. And Al Ewing clearly loves Magneto and Storm so much. And so this book has been interesting to say the least. And finally, my favorite book of this week was Star Wars Visions #1, which is built off the Star Wars Visions kind of animated, series that does different animation styles. First it did anime, then it did it from all around the world. And this one's about the Ronin. And the Ronin was a breakout character from the very first little short of Star Wars Visions. And this book was fantastic. And I had to read it at least twice just from the jump. It's also in that kind of black, white, and red style of comics. And the artwork was gorgeous. And it's simply a story about how the Ronin got his droid friend that you see in that episode and how they first met. But it's this insane dual story that takes place across time and from the perspective of this very interesting old Sith Lord. And so it's a great book, and the Star Wars Vision stuff is killing it for me. Like one of the best things Star Wars is doing right now. And the Ronin is a great character. And I hope we keep going with that because I love this character so much. And this was my favorite book this week.
Got to add that to my list. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I was very excited to read it this week. I got to rattle off a bunch of books. But Jim, anything you wanted to shout out before
you've got a few on your list that I'll add comments to as I go on. Cool. But some of the other ones I wanted to shout. I'm just going to do very quick shout outs because I didn't get Richard covers for this. Duke #2 from Image is the most fun with a like. I'm a sucker for 90s era Image heroes, right? And the premise of this basically just like it's a character from that catching up with him. He's this old grizzled kind of like Cable-esque kind of thing, but it's just glorious, updated 90s Image stuff that I just absolutely love. And then the only other one that I wanted to shout out was Holy Roller, the Rick Remender book that he's doing with Andy Samberg, which has been a lot of fun. Rick Remender is one who's like, I love his big ideas, and then sometimes it takes a little for them to kind of cook for me a little bit. And this one's just been a lot of fun, and the art's phenomenal. So those are some great ones to check out as well.
Well, sticking in the Image and Skybound thing, I've been really loving what they've been doing with G.I. Joe. Cobra
G.I. Joe
Commanders
Real American Hero, the Larry
also
Hama book.
good.
I don't understand how 40 years later Larry Hama is still writing some of the best G.I. Joe stories, period.
But it's been so funny. Cobra Commander, picks up. Man, what a brutal. There's a lot of kind of being just like Cobra Commander just being tortured for half the issue, but like it's still so. Like the fact that they're still building a character there and making him be the menacing one, even though he is on the receiving end of all this just like awful stuff, just like sows the seeds for how you see how powerful he will become just in how he approaches every given situation, and things will turn around. Also, it's awesome to see the kind of wider expanse of G.I. Joe characters. We get a lot in here in this particular issue. Zorana is a big one, like it's a big fan favorite, right? And it's awesome that she's jumping in here. So I just love that we're including more and more of them. Man's Best is a launch as a #1. This is it is described as Homeward Bound in space, and I kind of it's an apt title. It's also got a bit of like a wild science fiction-y vibes. There's a bigger mystery at play as to like where they are. They are essentially, these 3 animals you see on the cover are support animals for these scientists that are kind of trying to essentially save humanity by discovering another planet, a habitable planet and stuff. And things go awry, and they end up being the ones like they're trying to find the owners and the people who were kind of leading this party, and they're on this like unknown planet with this unknown species that they've been kind of training to fight, but they haven't done it very well. And so you just literally have like these 3 animals, like one's got a rocket on him, another one has a visor that he puts down and like can shoot lasers, another one can have a shield. Like there's all these weird concepts, and they're just trying to make it work. It's delightful. I loved this. I thought this was such a fun book, but also tense, and there's stakes, and like people seemingly die. So I mean, there's a lot of stakes there. I really dug this. J. Michael Straczynski's You and I has been it was an interesting debut. That was a weird issue. I really loved it, but like it actually, I had to kind of read it twice to really feel like I had a grasp on like kind of some of the other aspects to the book. And #2 like really solidifies the main duo here, and it kind of gives you that to latch onto, and the art is just phenomenal. These action sequences, like this guy just has the mysterious You, that's his name is You, has just like these powers that essentially just make him unkillable, but it's unlike like Luke Cage where like bullets just bounce off. No, the bullets go in and go through sometimes, and it's a mess. It's kind of like we were talking about the Crow, right? It's that kind of feel of like he can take a lot of damage, but it's visceral when he does, and yet he still keeps moving. So it's a really interesting issue there.
Great to see Mike Choi back doing interiors.
Oh my
too,
god,
so, yeah.
Fantastic artwork. This book
Missed
is beautiful. That guy. Vengeance of Moon Knight #3. Again, talk about gorgeous issues. My god, like Capuccio is just, man, nomination for me of like, as long as that dude is drawing Moon Knight, he will be in my top of the year nominations. Man, my god. But I really digging this. Again, this is following the Midnight Mission. Jim, what have you been thinking about Moon Knight?
Man, I've been like leading up to the end of the previous run and all that. I kind of been like I was reading it because out of obligation, it felt like. And even the first issue of Vengeance kind of felt like that for me. Issue 2 felt a bit, like we were maybe picking back up some steam. And issue 3, I'm back on the Moon Knight train.
Soldier, baby. Sure. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think one of the things that Jed does really, really well is superhero drama, and that is here in full effect with he lets Alessandro just go nuts art wise. There's great action kind of all around. I'm glad to be back on the Moon Knight train.
And then finishing up with Spider-Boy. I will continue to sing the praises of Spider-Boy. Also, my nomination for, I'm always bagging on Reed Richards and Beast. I will say, Peter Parker's entering that list for me. Like, that dude, what the hell, man? My God, he can't be a mentor to save his life. He couldn't mentor a paper bag. Like, wow, just awful. So anyway, so there's my thing there. And if you want to see, number one, I still love the issue, but not because of Peter. It's all because of Spider-Boy and kind of the fantastical aspects to things. If you want to read a great team up that shows someone who's actually a good mentor, go and read Spider-Woman number 5, which also has Spider-Boy and is great. So you should read that. And then final for me is JL versus Godzilla versus Kong, which is Justice League, obviously a short in that. But number 6, this is just super fun, as over the top and bombastic as you would expect a crossover like this to be. But it's just fun. It's popcorn, man. I dig it so far.
Yeah. This series has just been like, this is popcorn comics. Like, if that was a thing, that's what that is.
All right. So I think that'll do it for us. We got to get out of here. Kofi, any last things you want to shout out before we head out?
Read comics.
Yes. Read. Of course, you can check out all of our in-depth reviews. Chase Magnet puts together all the wonderful writers here. We have a ton of reviews on the site that you can read live on Comicbook.com, so definitely check that out. And as always, you can follow us right here on Comic Book Nation. We're always talking comics, not just on the pull list, but across all of our shows and everything on our YouTube channel and our podcast feed. So until next week, peace. Have a good one.
So yeah.